The message arrived at 12:01 a.m., a ripple of cold light across my dark ceiling. I had fallen asleep with the window cracked and the rain was doing that soft, steady thing it does when the city is too tired to complain. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon oil from the table I'd wiped after dinner. I keep that table clear. 2 pens in a ceramic cup, a single folder with a brass clip, an index card with the grocery list printed in my tight square hand. My phone buzzed once, then stilled. I don't keep previews on the lock screen because I respect endings and beginnings. When I slid my thumb across the glass, the line was already set in the place where a heart would be. If phones had hearts, don't come, no name. But the thread was headed by the faces of my brother, Evan, and his fiancée, Naomi, our aunt who adores a group chat. Naomi's mother, Helen, whose texts always read like declarative sentences handed down from weather. I stared at the words until the corners of the screen blurred. I typed, of course. Then I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I have learned that night hours stretch when you argue with them. The clock read 12:03 a.m. I could picture the venue, the conservatory's glass panes, the smell of damp ferns, even in the dark. The stake, as these nights require you to name it, was precisely $4,800 and 6 hours. That was the photographer's cancellation fee for a within 7 days call, the remainder after the $1,200 retainer I'd paid as my gift to them months ago. If someone clicked cancel at midnight by sunrise, somewhere around 5:58 a.m., when the studio manager stirred her coffee and refreshed the CRM, the invoice would route, per the assignment I filed last month, to the person who canceled. I breathed out. In the black window, my face floated like a coin on water. At 5:58 a.m., my phone woke in a neat cascade. 19 missed calls stacked like books. Evan, Naomi, 2 from Helen, 6 from a number I didn't recognize that I knew was the cousin tasked with handling. 1 from a man named Jay, photo, with a star beside it. Because I star the people who do what they say they'll do. A new email slid in over the pile. The subject line was as calm as a half-closed door. Invoice, late cancellation, $4,800. Client, H. Park. I made coffee. The rain had softened to a mist, and the light had that milky quality that makes rooms honest. I didn't answer anything yet. Who I am. My name is Sloane Mercer. I'm the one in my family who can set a time, hold a line, and metabolize the panic around a forgotten dress shirt into a lint roller and a receipt. I run operations for a mid-size performing arts center, where the lighting rig knows more about temper than most people do. My job is to keep a calendar on the wall and a contract in the drawer and make introductions between strangers and rules. When my father left the first time, my mother taped the insurance policy to the inside of the cabinet door and said, "You don't win by yelling at paper." I was 8 and convinced that grown-up signatures had more weight than gravity. In my teens, I learned the sounds of printers grinding out drafts and the oily smell of toner after a long run. I liked how paper held its breath when you laid a palm flat, steadying it in place. I liked the little ridge my pen left when I signed my name, not because the ridge mattered, but because it meant I had felt myself moving. I'm not sentimental about weddings. Or maybe I am, but in a way that prefers the feeling in a foyer as people take coats, to the feeling in a ballroom when someone tries to force a toast into a therapy session. When Evan and Naomi got engaged, he asked me for vendor wisdom. I told him the only wisdom that mattered: pick people who will pick up the phone at 5:58 a.m. if it matters. Put exactly who's authorized in writing. Let the terms do the talking. I covered the photographer's retainer as my gift because I like photographs that look like secrets explained. The lever, what they try to take. They tried to take my standing and my stillness, which in our family amounts to the same thing. The uninvite at 12:01 a.m. wasn't about me not being there to watch Naomi walk down the fern aisle. It was about removing my name from the quiet machinery that keeps days from breaking. A week earlier, Helen had insisted on simplifying things. She wrote to the vendors from a new Gmail with a subject line like an invoice: family coordination, new primary. She CC'd me, which was the slip, because CCing is a thing people do when they want you to pretend you haven't been removed. The lever had a thin handle and a heavy head. Helen wanted to reconfirm the photographer for a reduced number of hours to save budget, meaning cancel the one we had locked with the retainer and swap in a cousin's friend who does great work on Instagram. It wasn't about art. It was about control. At 12:09 a.m., 8 minutes after the uninvite, a cancellation form went through the photographer's portal. It came from a device that geolocated to a suburban IP where Helen's house sits under a maple like an old dog. The form had her full name typed in a font that gave itself away, slightly too smooth where it curved. The moment her cursor hit submit, the lever connected with the fulcrum I had set weeks ago. I had filed a one-page assignment with the studio, Archer and Pine, 30 days prior, moving the client of record from me to Evan and Naomi. Attached to the assignment was a tiny clause we had discussed with the studio manager. Any cancellation within 7 days would be invoiced to the account that initiated the request and authorized by the current client of record. In the assignment, the authorized contacts were Evan and Naomi, not Helen. I think she assumed I was still the one holding the bag. People confuse gift with glove. The shift, receipts of erosion. Receipts have a tone. They don't yell. They stack. By 1:03 a.m., I had 3. The first was an access email telling me I had been removed from the Wedding HQ portal Naomi had set up on Wedflow. The subject line said, "You no longer have access to this event." The body said, "If you think this is a mistake, contact your admin." The admin was Naomi. The timestamp was 12:19, and there was a faint thrill in reading "no longer" and realizing one can be both relieved and erased in the same breath. The second was a studio CRM blip. Archer and Pine uses a client portal called Day Ledger. At 12:17 a.m., a cancellation record, digitally signed by H. Park, had landed in their queue. The audit log showed the submission origin city, the time, the IP block. You didn't need to be a detective. You needed to be awake enough to spell neighbor. The third was a bank screen. At 5:58 a.m., a pending authorization hold appeared on a card that wasn't mine. The bank's fraud department calls these merchant's favorite pre-breakfast, and they look like a faint watermark next to the words pending. I knew because I had seen the same screen when we held a hold for a dance company cancellation last spring. The hold sits like a pause. Then the charge walks in through the door. This one read $4,800 from Archer and Pine, the fee triggered by same-week cancellation per Section 7. The card belonged to Helen. The memo line displayed an anonymized version of her name and the bank's unique glyphs. It blinked like a lighthouse. You don't need to steer. Just stop aiming for rocks, and then there were the smaller things, the pre-transition tone of Helen's email from the night before about taking it from here, the italicized, time-sensitive, the new subject lines, that read like command statements. I printed nothing yet. I lined the emails up on my screen and watched the timestamps like a cardiac rhythm, the ally and the motif line. Her name was Nadia Reyes, and she wore a sweater the color of graphite. Studio manager at Archer and Pine, she had the voice of someone whose phone lives on a stack of contracts. I had met her in person a month earlier when I stopped by to file the assignment. She'd filed my one page with a precise action I appreciate. 2 holes punched, put in a binder behind a tab that read, Assignments Standing. At 6:11 a.m., I called. She answered on the second ring with, "Good morning, Sloane," and the sort of unflustered calm you want from a surgeon and a studio manager. I got an email at 12:01 a.m. and a cancellation at 12:17, I said. "You'll have it in your queue." "I do," she said, a smile in her voice. "And I have your assignment in front of me." Paper rustled, a dignified sound. Per Section 7, we route the $4,800 late cancellation fee to the person who canceled, and we require the current client of record to acknowledge the request. "That isn't me," I said. "No," she said. "It's Evan and Naomi. Their signatures are on your assignment. We'll ask them to confirm they want to cancel. If they don't, the original booking stands and we shoot as contracted. If they do, we send the invoice to Ms. Park, who clicked cancel. Either way, you're an FYI, I exhaled. I think the sound made Nadia smile a second time. "Let the terms do the talking," she said. "It's what we tell our team when the room gets loud." I wrote that on a sticky note and parked it at the top of my screen. Later, I would write it again on an index card and tape it under the lid of my brass clip folder. It was an ordinary line that felt like a hand on my shoulder. People think motif lines arrive like prophecies. They arrive like instructions you already knew. The move, decisive, non-technical, just one move. Not technical. I did not go to the venue or the house. I did not write a post about the Uninvite. I did not call my aunt. I sent 2 emails and placed 1 request. First email, to Nadia, CCing the studio's contracts address. Subject, assignment on file, route comms to authorized contacts. Body, thanks for the early morning clarity. Per my assignment filed 30 days ago, please direct all decision asks to Evan Mercer and Naomi Park. I acknowledge receipt of your 5:58 a.m. invoice to H. Park. For transparency, I've attached the one-page assignment and the signature confirmation. S. Attachment, the PDF of our filed assignment, complete with my signature ridge and their countersign. It's funny how a PDF retains the weight of a pen if you're the one who remembers where it fell. Second email, to the venue manager, Rita, who keeps a clipboard that could hold a small door closed. Subject, security list unchanged. Body, Rita, I'm no longer attending. Please keep the authorized list unchanged. Evan Mercer and Naomi Park. Helen Park for decor only. No cancel or contract calls from me. If you receive any attempts to reassign vendors, please refer to the vendor contracts for authority. Thank you for minding the gate. S. Request, to my bank, in the app, a simple feature request we use often at the Arts Center whenever there's turbulence. Pause notifications from non-starred contacts for 24 hours. It's a tiny tool no one advertises because it's a liability if overused. But I knew it existed because I have watched donors argue at midnight and call back at dawn with gratitude and egg on their faces. I paused everything but what I needed to see. The phone settled. The room stilled. I made oatmeal and put a line through milk on the grocery list. Fallout. Visible consequences. By 9, the pause expired and the phone woke up as if my quiet had annoyed it. 19 missed calls reappeared with the vigor of a chorus. 10 new texts arrived like a flock of birds that can't commit to a direction. The Instagram post Naomi's cousin made at 7:04 a.m., some people don't know how to be happy for others, had 34 likes, and a comment from someone with a sunflower in her handle asking, "What happened?" The smear was neat, almost storybook in its economy. I didn't argue with the screen. I posted a receipts thread to my private account visible to the small circle that sends me soup and poems when my hands shake, and to the 3 people who had texted me kind questions without an angle. The thread was 5 slides, white background, black text, no emojis. Slide 1, at 12:01 a.m., I received an uninvite. Slide 2, at 12:17 a.m., a cancellation request was submitted to Archer and Pine from H. Park's email IP. Screenshot, redacted audit log with times. Slide 3, assignment filed 30 days ago. Current client of record, Evan and Naomi. Cancellation requires their acknowledgement. Section 7, routes fees to the canceling. Party. Slide 4, 5:58 a.m., studio invoiced. $4,800 to H. Park, courtesy, CC to me. Screenshot, top left of the invoice with the amount in recipient H. Park redacted line below. Slide 5, I'm not attending. Wishing them a day that holds. Then I closed the app. At 9:22 a.m., Nadia texted, they opted not to cancel. We're shooting as contracted. Invoice still owed by H. Park for initiating late cancellation. It triggered the fee. We'll apply it as a credit to the couple's balance. I smiled. The law of the lever. Sometimes you lift, and sometimes you let gravity do it. The phone vibrated with a message from Rita. All calm at load-in. Noted your note. I pictured her clipboard. Sometimes the institution you need is a person with a pencil. At 10:16 a.m., Helen called and left a voice message that began, Sloane, be reasonable, which is a phrase that means, pretend the paper doesn't exist. She said she'd explain later, the midnight text. She did not say the words, I clicked cancel. She did say, we can't pay $4,800 for a button, which feels like a plea until you read Section 7, the confrontation scene. We met the next day at a cafe with frosted glass and spoons that felt unnecessarily heavy. I arrived 2 minutes early and sat where I could see the door and the wall clock. When Helen came in, she wore a blazer that suggested a more formal venue and placed her handbag on the table as if making an argument. I'm going to record, I said as the server poured water. For clarity, I tapped the red circle on my phone. She checked the room. She nodded. You understand how late it was, she began. I was protecting Naomi's sleep. I understand the hour, I said. It was 12:01 a.m. when you uninvited me. Her mouth tightened. You take things literally. The terms are literal, I said. They work better that way. She took a breath. A practiced inhale meant to signal reasonableness. I canceled the photographer at 12:17 a.m. in a moment of poor judgment, she said, the cadence legal enough to admit but not quite confess. We decided to proceed with the original contract in the morning. The fee is punitive. It's a consequence, I said. Section 7 sets it at $4,800. That's the difference between punitive and math. I thought you were the client, she said. And there it was, the fulcrum of the lever she had assumed existed. I thought the fee would go to you. It went to the person who clicked cancel, I said. That's you. If Evan and Naomi had confirmed cancellation, it would have stayed on you. They didn't. It stayed a fee. Archer and Pine applied it as a credit to their balance because they chose to proceed. You're very good at this, she said, and the compliment curdled at the edges. Too good. I like paper, I said. Paper likes me. She looked down, then up. Naomi is crying, she said, weaponizing a daughter's tears on a table between us like a piece of cutlery. She can cry and someone can pay a fee, I said gently. Those can happen at the same time. You've always been like this, she said. Rigid. Boundary is not rigid, I said. It's architecture. The server set the bill in a leather folder that clicked when it closed. The sound sat in the recording like a gavel. You could pay it, she said. Last try, clean and shameless. As your gift. My gift was the retainer, I said. It's in their shots now. You clicked cancel. That purchase is yours. The recording will show I said this with kindness. She stared at the phone. For a moment, I thought she might ask for the file. Instead, she placed cash for her tea on the table and stood too quickly, bumping the heavy spoon so it chimed like a bell. I'll talk to Evan, she said. He doesn't like conflict. Then he should like contracts, I said. I saved the file to a folder named Clear, a folder I keep for the handful of conversations that demand a light and a label. The reckoning, formal boundary decision. The bank notification landed 2 days later with the curt grammar banks use when they prefer not to be people. Merchant process charge $4,800 Archer and Pine. Dispute? Reply no. I didn't reply anything. It wasn't my card. I made soup and waited for the other shoe with the same patience I use when the wind knocks the fern fronds against glass in the conservatory and you have to decide whether to tape them or trust them. A week after the wedding, I sat in a bland room at Small Claims where everything looked rented, even the air. I wasn't a party. Nadia had CC'd me on the docket request only because she knows I sleep better when all the pages face the same way in my head. Helen had filed a fee dispute against Archer and Pine, claiming unjust enrichment. The judge was a woman with glasses that magnified her eyes in a way that made me think of owls and floodlights. The hearing lasted 12 minutes. Archer and Pine's counsel, a young man with a briefcase that looked too new, read Section 7 into the record with the flat tone of someone who has given up trying to make people love clauses. He presented the audit log showing the 12:17 a.m. cancellation from Helen's device. He presented the assignment moving the client of record from me to Evan and Naomi 30 days earlier, countersigned and filed. He presented Nadia's email asking Evan and Naomi to confirm cancellation and their reply, 7:32 a.m. No, we proceed. The judge asked for clarification. So the fee was triggered by Ms. Park's cancellation attempt and credited to the couple's balance when they proceeded? Counsel said, yes. The judge turned to Helen. Ma'am, did you click cancel? Helen's hands twisted in her lap. In a moment of poor judgment, she said. And 1,000 small things turned in the room and clicked flush. Claim dismissed, the judge said, and her gavel tapped the wood once. A sound like a phrase contract writers love. Full stop. Institutional validation isn't a bronze statue. It's the body of a thing standing up and saying, we do not treat this as fluid. The venue sent me a note later that afternoon thanking me for the clear boundaries and pre-work. Nadia mailed a letter on cotton paper with a single sentence. Per our terms and the court's order, account settled. Archer and Pine sent Evan and Naomi their gallery 4 weeks later, a hinge on each image where a morning becomes a memory. I looked at their smiles and felt the strange relief that comes when you realize you are not a character in a story you didn't write. You are a person who made soup while the paper did its job, aftermath and meaning. There's a small brass camera charm I keep in a catch-all near the door. It was a silly gift from a volunteer at the Arts Center who thinks my key bowl is a personality trait. The afternoon the gallery link arrived, I took the charm out and held it in my palm. It was cool and heavy for its size, like medallions pretend to be. I fished an old shadow box from my hall closet, the glass a little dusty, the hinges a little stubborn. I printed Section 7 in 12-point font and trimmed it narrow, a column of text with a red line under within 7 days. I slid it into the shadow box behind the glass. I placed the brass camera charm over the words so it sat like a punctuation mark. I closed the latch and listened to the click. It sounded like relief deciding to stay. On my table, the brass clip folder lay where it always does. Inside, the assignment, the countersign, the tiny stick-on note where I'd scrawled, "Let the terms do the talking." I added an index card to the lid. The hand that clicks, cancel pays. It doesn't rhyme and it doesn't need to. Some lessons don't need melody. In the weeks after, Naomi sent a text that said, "I'm sorry for the midnight." And I thumbed back, "May your mornings be bright," Evan called. The way brothers do when they have lived near a flame and decide to learn about water. "I hate that it went like that," he said. "It went the way it had to," I said. "We'll do dinner when your week breathes." Helen didn't call. The world did not end. The part of me that keeps lists put a check mark next to photographer and a new line beneath it. Ferns. I went to the conservatory on a Tuesday when the light is best and the benches are empty. I sat near the glass where the panes meet, the seam like a spine. The rain ticked lightly. I thought of my mother's line about not yelling at paper and smiled. The way you do when the room finally matches your pulse, the platter of 19. Missed calls doesn't mean more than it meant the second it arrived. The $4,800 invoice remains a number attached to a choice. The 6 hours between midnight and sunrise sit in my memory like a hallway I walked without turning on the lights. Sometimes I stand at my table, lay my palm on the folder, and feel the ridge my pen makes when I sign my name. It's nothing. It's everything. It says I was here. I registered. I didn't yell.